All right. I'm good.
You good?
Yeah.
All right. Clap on. You know when to clap. Anyway. 3, 2, 1.
Word. I'm good.
All right. Yeah.
Alrighty. So we're back with episode 19, I think it is now.
Yeah. 19.
Nearing on episode 20. Getting there.
Getting there.
And today, we're thinking our topic of discussion is somewhat random, but I want to talk about a typical destination. This being, there's going to be a lot of haters. I feel like people get up in a tizzy when people just say Europe generally, but I'm going to say Europe generally. Mostly mainland Europe we'll talk about. We're going to exclude Scandinavia for the sake of the fact that I frequently speak about Scandinavia. Is it a good destination to go for the summer? Is it a good place to live? What do we think about it? What are our experiences? I don't have much experience in mainland Europe. 0 to be exact.
Mainland Europe.
But I do have a lot of content consumption at the very least.
I feel like it's like it's a relatively like popular part of the world. A lot of pop culture on it, especially like Americans like idolize it in a lot of ways. So we're definitely exposed to it.
Yeah. So, I guess to start us off, Nico, you've been around Europe a little bit more than me.
A little bit.
What are your where have you been? What have you thought?
Okay, so I've been to Ireland. I've been to Spain. I've been to France and Switzerland, like specifically just basically like Geneva, Chamonix, so just that area, like very briefly. I was not there for very long. And then I've also been to Italy. Northern Italy only though. I didn't make it down to any of like the big cities there, just mainly northern countryside Italy, which was nice as well. Honestly, I'm a big Europe fan. Would I ever go to it over like somewhere in Asia? Like probably not, but that's because I'm an Asia glazer. But like,
okay, let's break that down. Why are you an Asia glazer over Europe?
I think, well, there's a number of parts here. There's moving parts, right? I got some heritage there. I've been learning I guess I speak Spanish, which is nice in Spain, but here's the thing. In a lot of ways, when you're an American in Europe, you're treated like not the best. People have a pretty poor impression of you. And you know what? It's not always their fault because there are a lot of American tourists that are not very kind or respectful or, they're just causing a nuisance in these people's cities, basically. And so, like, I get it in that way. And I just think that, I just don't blend in there. Like, people can obviously tell I'm not from there. In Asia, a little easier to blend in. Treated a lot less like a tourist. So, I appreciate that. And even if I am, like, treated like a tourist, it's always like, oh, are you from, like, Singapore? Or, like, are you from, and if are you from Japan? Or are you from Taiwan? Like, regardless of where I go, it's kind of like they assume, like, I'm, like, a regional tourist, which is a lot better than, like, assuming you're the American. I don't know if you like, because you've been to Norway.
Yeah, that is fair. You think that is fair. You think you're treated better as a tourist in Asia?
I think so.
Because visually is one thing, but then once they talk to you, like, presumably they understand you are a tourist. So
yeah. But even if you're like,
but you still think that they're like chill about it.
I think so. I think the main issue would be like if I was like in China and they thought I was Japanese, but then I speak Chinese, so I'm fine. And in Japan, if they think I'm from China, I can just say I'm Taiwanese, and then they're super chill with Taiwan. You know what I mean? So like, there's some like potential like for confrontation on those like lines, but I pretty much avoid them.
Right.
But like, I know you want to keep it on like mainland Europe, but I don't know how you felt in Scandinavia about that, because you went to Norway and Sweden.
Yeah, I was in Norway and Sweden. Yeah, I mean, I think that there I was treated very well, but it's a little different because I spoke the language quite well, and that's something that they're like they never see. So I think that they're like extremely receptive to people who speak the language. It's like, oh my gosh, you spent the time to learn our language, and then they were super nice to me. But I've heard on the flip side, I've heard that they're not that receptive to other people who don't speak as much. Like typically, Scandinavians get a rep for being somewhat like cold
Right.
and not approachable,
Mm-hmm.
which was not my experience, but I do think that's unique to my situation. So I think as a
Right.
general rule, there is like a little bit less of a vibe. I think like my mom knew somebody who had moved to one of the Scandinavian countries. I forget where, or like it was like a friend of a friend of a friend type of thing. So
Right.
but they had like moved there and then ended up moving back because
Oh.
I think they didn't integrate very much. Like they were
Mhm.
just completely English speaking, and
Right.
they didn't feel like well received, I
Right.
guess. Which to me is very surprising. I honestly haven't heard that review much at all,
Yeah.
but in that case, that was what was said.
Right.
But I have heard. I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast a little bit before, but I think that getting back to mainland Europe, France has a particular rep for being a little bit of haters in this regime. I think Italy kind of gets this rep too, of really not liking the American tourists.
Yeah.
I get a lot of like you hear stories about someone going to Italy and it's like they order their pizza or something in some way that isn't accepted socially and then get some bad looks, some rude waiters.
Yeah.
My only experience with something like that is that when we're in Canada, I know it's not Europe, but they got French speakers there. And let me tell you, everyone who is fully English speaking, chill. The French speaking Canadians, not chill at all. And we would pull up, we were at this one restaurant, and like this waiter was just like somewhat nasty. It was, I can't even describe exactly what they were doing, but there was like a definite vibe of they weren't messing with us. And my family's very respectful and whatever. We weren't loud, like we're not loud people. I honestly don't know what I think we were waiting outside and we had like asked for the time, like asked how long the line was or something like that. And they like came out and came in. I was getting bad vibes. And that's the first time I ever had bad vibes from a waiter. Maybe not the first time, but one of the most distinct times in my memory. And I'm not sure that it's a coincidence that I was a French speaker. Just saying. But I don't know if you were well received in France.
So it's I was not in Paris is the thing.
Right.
So I think like I got like kind of a non-representative experience in that sense, but part of France that I went to, people were very nice. I do think a lot of that is like most of the people I talked to were people like in the mountains around Chamonix, and these people are living in the mountains of Chamonix. And dude, you got to be chill to like live there, like surely, right?
Right.
So
right.
the kind
I think
of
just
people that I'm
mountains
talking
generally.
to, is just, yeah, mountains generally just people
that's
are
fair.
chill. So.
And then Italy same, Spain same. What were your experiences?
Yeah, I mean Italy's. In Venice, I didn't like Venice first of all, fade Venice. But in Venice, kind of everyone's a tourist, so you're not really treated poorly for being a tourist. And then the rest of my time in Italy was in northern countryside Italy, which is just full of like equally chill Italians. I didn't go to Rome or Florence and didn't really I wasn't in touristy areas in that way. So the people I was talking to weren't like sick of talking to Americans. And then Spain is like, I speak pretty good Spanish, so like that's already like a little disarming. And then I just think, Spaniards in general are probably like a little more chill. I'd say like the exceptions like Barcelona, just because they've had so many tourists and tourists have kind of like overrun the city. But if you just de-emphasize Barcelona a little bit, maybe not make it your main stop. I mean, I think it's definitely worth stopping. It's like a beautiful city and stuff, but you definitely feel like a tourist there, and you definitely feel that people don't necessarily want you to be there.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't there some I feel like there was some conflict on the news in the last year or something about Barcelona people leaving graffiti or something about go home or something like that. But
Yeah, there's a bunch of
I could be
graffiti all
mixing it up
over
with
that
somewhere
says
else.
"tourists go home," basically.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but I didn't like experience any like actual nasty treatment from people there. Everyone was like relatively nice, especially when you're speaking Spanish to
Right.
them. Um,
And let's talk about aesthetics in the place
aesthetics.
that you've been.
Yeah.
Is this something that sets apart Asia versus Europe for you? Like, the mountains, the cities, the aesthetic. What's your read? You like it?
I mean, I think the issue with, and I guess this is like kind of what Asia's like becoming, but it's still like a little less. Europe is so like, and I really just don't like the way that we think about Europe and the way that we like treat it in some ways. It kind of just feels like a playground. Um,
Mm.
and I think it's just a product of social media and influencer culture, but it almost feels like it's kind of hard to explain, but it's kind of like the feeling of like when you're in Europe and you're in these population centers or places that are popular, it kind of feels impossible to feel like you're really there in some ways because there's just so many tourists who are American especially, but people from all over the world really, and so in a lot of ways it does feel like Disney World in that sense. Whereas I do get that feeling a little bit in Japan, but because I mean, Tokyo's like such a large city, and then aside from Tokyo, I've mainly been to Hokkaido. But like China, for example, the main tourists are just other Chinese people, so it feels a little less like amusement parky in that sense, where it's like just a bunch of people descending upon this poor village or whatever because it had some ancient thing happen there.
Right.
And a bunch of influencers said it was really cool, and everyone has like the specific pose that they want to do. And yeah, so I mean, I just think as an American, like it's just way more in our culture or not our culture, just like the way that like people travel to like go to Europe and do those kinds of things. So it just seems like it feels like when I'm doing Asia, it feels a little bit more unique. I think I feel a little bit more like good about myself in a lot of ways, even though like at the end of the day I'm doing the same thing, just in a different place. I just think like
Right.
I'm chasing a different aesthetic and a different like experience. Like just gives me a different I just feel better about traveling in general.
Right.
Yeah.
No, 100%. I think for me, my perspective is I definitely want to travel around a lot of Europe. I think it's like a very intriguing place, but I do think that I would want to avoid a lot of the most popping places for sure. I don't have very much interest in Paris. For me that would be kind of like a layover place. I would like to see it for 24 hours or something, but I don't ever see myself doing like a trip to Paris or really any of the major cities. I feel like I don't know. I think to me like the allure of Europe is the nature and like the quaint stuff and the history. But I do think you have to be a little bit tactical about it. And also, I mean, it comes back to things we've talked about before, but I do have I somewhat take issue with the fact that so many people do these Euro summers or whatever it might be, where it's like, okay, we're going to hit Spain and then France and then Italy and then Croatia and tack on Greece at the end. And it's like, all right, I mean, I think that contributes to this feeling of it being overrun somewhat because it's not as if people are just picking one destination. It's like everyone's hitting everything. So then there's always people everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
And it just feels somewhat overrun in that sense. Yeah, I think the social media stuff is tough because it's just like, what are you gonna do? People are gonna post pictures of cool places, and then those places get traffic, and it really does cause an issue. And I think that's, places like Japan definitely get a ton of tourists, but what's nice is they like somewhat isolated. People go to Kyoto and they go to Tokyo, and think about it, like nowhere in between, and nowhere on either end. So I feel like, yeah, Europe does get kind of all the hot spots get hit by everybody, and then that makes it a tricky thing. But I don't think it takes away the value. Like, I think Europe is like super fire. Like, I definitely want to explore Europe a bunch, but I do think that you want to, I don't know, maybe optimize for going to like not even off season, but just kind of off the beaten path places. Because it feels like sad because, for example, in Switzerland, right? I feel like I see a lot of Switzerland content, and it will be like Grindelwald or whatever it is, and it's like there's probably 50 towns that are so similar to Grindelwald, and that's the one that blew up, and then everyone hits them, and like you could just be in like the next Grindelwald and the next social media boom if you just go a couple miles down the road, probably.
Right.
And people don't see that, and then they, you get this curated experience that feels very much like you are, whatever, in Disney World. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to preach too much about something I've never done, but it feels to me like if I was going to go and do that, my strat would be to hit some of the smaller places. And yeah, I don't know, but it has a lot of value. I think, but it gets tricky sometimes because like, sometimes the nature places for me, because I like the nature places, which in some cases draws you off the beaten path. Like you said, like even though Chamonix is pretty poppin' these days, less so than Paris. So you run into the more like chill mountain people, whatever. But for example, in Norway, Norway kind of runs on nature. Like it's not like a city country where people are like flocking to the cities as much. So the nature hotspots are the people hotspots, which then gets a little tricky because it's like some of them are just, they're unique and they're tough. So it's like if you want to see that site, you got to go there, and there's a bunch of other people there. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that people are starting to feel this effect, but instead of pivoting to like smaller European towns, at least like the wealthy classes, I feel like are pivoting to, Asia or even most recently, the one that I saw a lot of this spring break on my Instagram of people from Stanford was South America. I saw a ton of South America this spring break, sorry. And I had not seen that nearly as much before. So I don't know. I thought that was a kind of interesting dynamic shift.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense, though. It's just like stuff's becoming more accessible than ever, and, it's becoming like less and less like special to like travel. So like everyone's getting to travel, and it just
and I mean people just want that like tourist or non-tourist feel. They want like the authentic travel feel.
But not everyone does want that, because a lot of people do want that kind of like the Europe that they've heard about. They just want to go see
right. Well, that's the thing.
They want to go see the Big Ben or whatever. They want to see the Eiffel Tower. It's just kind of how it is.
Right. Well, what's actually interesting is I like a lot of the people that I saw going to South America. Well, some of them were like doing other things, but some of them in South America were going to like resort-esque things. And so then it gets confusing to me because it's like you're going to the place that's off the beaten path to kind of be at like the one place that's like standard or whatever, normal Western feeling in that place that, I don't know, it feels like counterintuitive that you would go there to then seek that experience. But to each their own.
Yeah, I mean, everyone kind of has their own things that they like to do. So,
right.
Just gotta figure that out. But, yeah, I mean, like, like you said, like, Euro Summer, I don't know, like, it's hard to, like, be like, oh yeah, you shouldn't do that because people only have so many days off in a year, and you know you want to see as much of the world as you can, and so it's hard to like convince people that you should spend more time
All of them
in
in
one
one place.
area, or like, you know, and then it's just yeah, like I've been saying, like this whole like influencer way of looking at things where it's and maybe not even just influencer, just the way that like the way that like Western society, especially, just like like viewed these like landmarks and as being so like central to like Western identity, and you know, it's kind of like Europe is like sort of like the birthplace of like a lot of our like, you know, the ways we think, and a lot of people's ancestors are from there. You know, so many Americans are claim, yeah, I mean, I'm from Italy, or like I'm from Ireland, just because they have ancestry there, even
Right.
even though they're like however many generations removed. So there's just like a really powerful like sense of I don't know. I think for Americans especially, it's just a really it's just something to like put their like non-existent identity to like to paper, kind of, and to sort of figure it out in a way, while also just like
Right.
going and getting drunk and having fun, um, which is what a lot of people do. Like that's honestly like the goal for like a lot of people.
Right. That's true. I honestly, yeah, I wasn't even really considering that. But I do think that is like a pretty major uh, objective for a lot of people, is like cities that have good nightlife and stuff like that. Which then it does oftentimes, I think, for those people end up being like these tourist hotspot type places, where they just end up drinking with a bunch of people who aren't even from the other tourists.
I mean, like, yeah, like global cities in that way. Like, I think you said this in a different episode. Just like culture kind of just converges in global cities, where the
Right.
kinds of things you can do and the things you find, they're all just not the same per se, but they're becoming more and more similar. Where it's, you know, we have we have these bougie craft coffee shops, you know, and we have these cocktail bars and these clubs, and we have these parks that you can go walk around in, museums, um, and there's definitely like variance between these things, but it's just like the kinds of things that you're doing are somewhat the same in all of like the global cities.
Right. No, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where it kind of goes from here, like whether it will just end up that everywhere is pretty much the same eventually, or what. But yeah, I don't know. I think point being,
Point being,
I don't really know what my objective of talking about this was, but I think for me that um, I don't think that any one place can officially lose value as a destination.
mm-hmm.
I think it just has to, you know, maybe you have to be a little bit more strategic with the way that you get your value. And I
Right.
feel like that's what Europe has become in my own case. Um, but it remains like a top destination for me, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I do think like
Is where I
another
wanted to go with this.
perspective to take here is, I guess this is like less true for Spain, Portugal, like those kinds of places, maybe even like Eastern Europe as well, but a lot of Europe's quite expensive compared to other travel destinations.
Mm.
Asia is super affordable. Africa, I mean, you were in Kenya, which is like a relatively affluent part of Africa, right? Or
Yeah,
a
I mean,
country in
Kenya
Africa.
is like a interesting one though, because day to day life and things like that. If you stay in a hostel or if you get lunch or whatever at a normal place, it's pretty cheap. But a lot of like the tourist things are super expensive,
Yeah,
because it's optimized for people who could like afford the plane ticket there. You know what I
I
mean,
see.
or whatever.
Right,
So if you want to go on a safari, if you want to go to a national park, like anything like that, you're dropping a pretty penny.
right.
But all of like day-to-day stuff is really cheap.
But yeah, I do think like just having like that's another big part of traveling is just seeing that like what oh my god, like I can buy all that for this. This would cost me however much for it. Dude, whenever I'm in like 7-Eleven in Japan, I'm like, dude, there's no way this thing was $3. Like this is just crazy.
Yeah, that is fair. I mean, it's a very privileged thing to be able to say that, I guess.
I know, it is.
Like, it is kind of crazy to think, because I mean, it's true, though. It often is. Like, you go somewhere else, and in my experience, and you're like, dang, like, this is so cheap, bro. But imagine, like, the alternatives that most people, when coming to the place that we are, it's like, oh my god, bro. Like, imagine you come from China, and you travel to... But, I mean, I guess probably it's self-selective, like, the people traveling from China to, Palo Alto to do whatever are the ones that already have money. But it's gotta be tough. You get a Sammy for $2 at home, and then it's like 30 Palo Alto, and that's gotta be a rough adjustment. But yeah, I agree. It is that effect, as an American traveler especially, that effect does feel kind of cool. You're like, wow, like, this is just so... Like, even the money's even so different.
Well, I think it's also just like think about like what people talk about when they come back from like a trip or whatever. It's like, oh, how was Japan? Oh my god, everything was so cheap. It was great. That's like almost
right.
That's gonna be
it's an early talking point for sure. It's gonna happen.
It's like that makes a huge impression. So when you're talking about like going to Europe or whatever, it's like. It's a little bit more rural in that sense, especially like if you go to Denmark.
No, yeah. I mean, in Norway, I had the opposite effect, definitely a little bit. Like, restaurant food is so expensive there. Unreal. I mean, maybe not much more than Palo Alto, but still more, I would say. Like, I would go and I remember getting a burger somewhere. I don't know why I was getting a burger. Maybe it was like a pulled pork sandwich or something. And I was thinking, in the US this would cost probably $20, and it was like 32. And I was like, jeez Louise, man.
Yeah.
32 for a
32
sandwich.
32 is
really
crazy
steep.
for a sandwich.
And it's not like a fine dining place, you know what I mean? So I feel like that's the difference too, is like it has to do with the vibe. If I'd gone if I went to a fine dining place in the U.S., I don't even know how to scale that either. So, sure, if I go to a fine dining place really anywhere in the world, it doesn't even matter if it's somewhere that's typically known as cheap, like Japan. If you go somewhere super bougie, like, you're going to get big prices kind of wherever in the world you are. But these were just, like, normal places. Just go anywhere, and you're just like, dang, super expensive. And again... That was an impression of my trip. I remember, telling people that story of buying my burger or buying my sandwich when I came home. So it certainly does make an impression. I think that's a good thing too. Like, sometimes I think about this, what things get kind of erased from your memory, or not erased, but subconsciously you begin to forget. Like, they get fuzzy, and then what things like remain. Super clear in your memory, and what determines which is which. Like, for example, I don't know. When I was bikepacking, I had a broken hand.
Yep.
And I genuinely, forget that often.
Really? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because it's just, almost erased from the experience. Because it's I saw the sights, I did the bike ride, it didn't really impact me. I mean, it impacted me in the way, I had to change my form the whole time I was biking. I remember being super scared about falling a lot of the time. All those, emotions, instantaneous, in the moment emotions of fear and whatever, get so erased from my memory and, the broad scope of the trip.
Yep.
And... it's kind of interesting how that happens. I'm trying to think, generally my impression from other trips. I mean, somewhat same thing. Working in Kenya, at the time, you're like, geez, I have a lot of work and whatever. I'm in the office a lot. But then when you look back, that monotone, 5 days of the week, me sitting in the office, gets, so shrunk down in comparison to, my little weekend trips where I was going different places. those grow in my memory, and then the trip kind of gets mostly replaced by like the activities that I did. Right. It's kind of an interesting thing because, cumulative time-wise, there's so much less than the time that I spent in the office.
Right. I also think another thing that gets really, that you remember a lot more clearly is just interactions with other people. And I tend to forget a lot about the more quiet moments. I mean, I've done a lot of solo travel, and I've definitely had great experiences on solo travel, right? Just like hanging out by yourself, like doing whatever, like you do a nice hike or whatever. And like those are memorable in their own way. But I do think that a lot more like clear memories are like those that where you're like, there's this one time in Beijing where I mean, it's not related to Europe, obviously, but this one time I was in Beijing and I was just walking like by this, like in the middle of nowhere in Beijing, kind of like on the outskirts a little bit. And there's this guy just like on the side of the road with like a bunch of beehives. And I just like sat and talked with him for like 20 minutes. Like that was, even though out of that day, those 20 minutes were such a small portion of the sheer length that I walked that day, which was so long. I think I probably walked like 20-ish miles that day.
What?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
Dude, I was just bored and I didn't want to like, I had already been to Beijing. I just wanted to go to the outskirts. I wanted to go climb a mountain. So I was trying to go find a mountain that was open because all the mountains kept telling me like, oh yeah, we're closed. I'm like, all right, you closed the mountain. Yeah, sure, buddy. But yeah, they did close the mountain. So I couldn't go up the mountains, and I was just like walking around the nature areas or whatever, like outskirts. And yeah, like I just talked to him for 20 minutes. Like it ended up being like, I still remember that. Like I still remember like what he said and like all those kinds of things. And I don't know if I had like a similar experience in Europe that I can think of in the sense of just talking to some random guy in the middle of nowhere. But like I do like recall fondly of just like speaking to random people in bars or whatever. But yeah.
Right.
I mean,
no, it's honestly a great point. I think that like human interaction is maybe the biggest example, but also just like small events. I mean, in my case, I totally agree. Like everywhere I've been, like in Norway, I remember like several distinct conversations that I had with random people, like hiking at my tent, at a grocery store, a guy who showed me around like Oslo originally, a guy on the train, like all these random things that are these huge highlights in my brain of what I pick out and remember. And same with every trip that I've been on. I do think that like human interaction is one of the things that you really, especially in a setting where you're somewhat devoid of it, like not running into just random people throughout the day. You're used to school or whatever it might be, walking around, running into different people, and then all of a sudden you're traveling, and maybe even if you're traveling with somebody else, it's like you're talking to that one person all day, and that's like who you're used to talking to, and so obviously those interactions aren't like this huge standout thing in your brain. Maybe some of them are, but not generally. And then when you run into someone new, then and have that conversation, then it really does stand out. And even more than that, I think just generally breaking things up. I think one of the things that came up when I was doing a drive down to Carmel with Elena, like a few, I guess 2 months ago, was there's like you're driving down and it's kind of this monotonous drive somewhat for most of it because you're on the coast, but it's like somewhat boring coast for some of it. And then there's like a little strawberry / fruit farm thing.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you could totally drive by it, like 100%. But you can also just pull into it and it will take like 5 minutes of your time. But those 5 minutes of breaking up the drive then become like a really memorable event in your head that you look back at fondly, and it like stands out in your memory. And so I guess like my point being, I really think it's a huge strategy to, when you're traveling, or it's just like generally in life, try and farm like these tiny little things that you think wouldn't be that important, because if it's just like new and interesting and breaking up the monotony of a otherwise like normal situation,
Yeah.
it becomes so like the magnitude of that in your memory is so much greater than all of those other little things combined.
Yeah, even like if you have some sort of objective or whatever that you're planning to do, totally valid. I mean, I think it's kind of hard to not like travel without any sense of what you're doing. But if you just find one thing along the way that like you're like, oh, like that shop looks cool, let me just go in, or that cafe looks like all right, like I'll go have a drink there or something. Like that is gonna be more memorable. You know, I'd say most of the time more memorable than even if you plan to go to whatever cafe and
Right.
whatever restaurant.
No,
Because
100%.
you already have an idea in your head of what that experience was going to be like. You already knew, like in a lot of ways. You already saw the pictures, you knew the menu, you knew what you were going to get. But when you go to those places that are kind of a surprise, it's like, wow, like actually, like wasn't expecting to go here, and like you're it just sticks a lot easier in the brain because you were not expecting to go there. It was something entirely new, and you get to just feel and remember the experience a lot more than like experiencing the thing through the pictures, because I think um, that's kind of how it plays out a lot of times when you're like doing something explicitly for an objective.
Right. Yeah, I honestly think it's big like meta, like
Yeah.
experience farming meta is just to do things spontaneously and kind of break up the like otherwise monotonous or planned like aspects of your life with just random things. Like even if that thing, like I'm imagining, like even if I went, uh, you almost can't lose. I think the only situation where you maybe lose is say you're traveling and you go to some random food spot and you get food poisoning. Okay, like okay, now your value probably was you're
That's
probably
fair.
down on total value
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But if the food is just like bad, even if I went to a place and food was like comically bad, that's still like a fun memory. I feel
Right.
like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You go through, you're gonna remember that place probably for the rest of your life that you just walked in. The food was just so bad. This hasn't happened to me yet. But like, I feel like I wouldn't even be that disappointed if it did. Just be like, all right, I took
Well,
a
I think in the
chance.
moment
It was
you might be
terrible.
disappointed in the moment.
Yeah, in the moment, I think you might be disappointed. But I mean, I'm saying this also kind of as someone who I don't frequently find food to be horrible.
Right.
But like I'm just imagining a place where like you go in, the food's just like comically bland, whatever. You go on with your day. It's not a day ruiner.
Right.
But when I look back, it's kind of this like juxtaposition of like in the moment, you might not even like think these moments are that significant. It's just a little thing. You're not thinking about the cafe like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. I just walked into a cafe and got a coffee. But because it's just something new and different, your brain hangs onto it and then it becomes significant in hindsight. I don't know.
Two suburban boys from Connecticut discover spontaneity. No, but it's funny because there's I guess going back to Europe, like when I was in Spain, there was this one day where I was in Basque Country, and I was going to this tourist destination, kind of. It's called San Juan de Gaztelugatxe, and it's like a Game of Thrones looking structure on the ocean. It looks sick.
Right.
Anyway, so I went there, had like saw the stuff, took the pictures, did everything. What I remember most about going there is because in order to get there, I had no car. I took like a bunch of buses or whatever, and then I like got dropped off in the nearby town, and then from the nearby town I walked to there, and like that walk was pretty chill. But after I was done like visiting the spot, I took a different route back, and it ended up with me just on the road So I basically just had to walk on the road for like an hour and a half to get like to
Did you not try to hitchhike?
Yeah, I mean a couple times, but not too often. I mean, I was having a good time. It wasn't like
Yeah, it's
I
fair.
wasn't like struggling or anything. And I had nowhere to be.
Right, that's fair.
So I wasn't, there were a couple times I did like try to flag people down, but no one stopped. Anyway, I was just like walking, and like walking on that road is more memorable than visiting the tourist destination to me.
Yeah.
And if you want to see it, I vlogged that. It's on my channel in the description, guys. Check it out.
Shout out.
Shout out Nico Liu. But yeah, like so many things happened on that walk also, and I mean I'm glad I vlogged it because I mean I can like look back on what happened, but like even if I hadn't vlogged it, that walk would be so just like visceral in my brain, just because I don't know. It's just a weird thing to do. Like it's like weird to walk on like not like a highway, but like essentially a highway, like a just a road in
The major road,
like
yeah.
a major road where just a bunch of cars are just going by, and you're just like the only guy walking for no reason other than you planned poorly.
Right.
But that becomes like the thing, and so that's just what has like those moments like those just like give me so much like, man, like I just love like not planning things well in a way, like purposefully.
Right. Yeah, I think you just have to trust again that it's not even about farming the most fire view necessarily or the best food or whatever. I think there's a place for that too. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. It's not like you have to avoid all the tourist spots and all the restaurants that you might have heard are good. Like nothing like that. Mm-hmm. But there's just definitely value in taking things spontaneously, not really always being super calculated, and seeing where that takes you. I think there's very few times that I regret a decision to do something, which is honestly something I need to like take more into my normal life. I think I'm pretty good about this when I'm traveling. It's like, yeah, like whatever. When I was in Kenya, for example, I was busy. I'm working full time. I had a lot of things going on, but it was like every weekend I was going to do some like cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like, you always have to have this like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm not going to like rest this weekend. I'm going to go do something cool. And, those were all super cool memories. But in my normal life, I do feel that sometimes, I'm not quite as like motivated to like do things.
Right.
But and there's value in chilling too and not doing things. But as a general rule, I do think that I don't regret the decision to do things, even if I don't like that thing that much. Generally, I don't know. So I feel like I need to take my travel perspective into my normal life more, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and I don't even think it's like a unique thing. I think most people do look for this from travel, but I think a lot of the ways that people sort of encounter it is more so in the, it's like late at night in the city and you're drunk and you're like on a side quest or whatever. So like in those moments, you're also getting that kind of same, that same sense of like adventure and like you have no idea what's happening and it's you've not planned very well and you're doing something that's interesting and cool and so you get like that same like feeling that like I did when I just had to walk for an hour on the road, but I think people generally just seek that out from travel, but the I feel like it's gonna be like a theme of the podcast going forward, like this convergence of culture has like made it so like like there's just that like the idea of like the drunk side quest is so like ingrained in a lot of ways, I don't know about you, but like I hear about it all the time.
Yeah, I hear about it a lot. I mean, I'm personally I don't have as much lore with that myself.
I mean, me neither.
But it's definitely a theme, people. Yeah, again, it's something that sticks out because I think it is a setting where maybe if people aren't they don't have as adventurous travel or whatever it might be, like that's where they experience that same sense of like something otherwise mundane or like, otherwise not noteworthy. Your side quest might be like, I don't know, you have to like, you just like went to another part of the city that you don't usually go to and whatever it might be. And so it's somewhat, at base, it doesn't sound that crazy. But if it's like something that you do spontaneously, all of a sudden that it does become something, and like people being under the influence, maybe it's just like another way to put them into that like experience chasing spontaneous mind frame.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think it kind of shows the same point in many ways, that just like doing things for the sake of doing things often becomes memorable and valuable.
Yeah, I mean, and I think ultimately, like, trying to tie this back to just Europe and sort of tourism in Europe in general, it's just, there's, it's a little hard to do, but there's definitely like, I think what we want to say with the podcast is not like, and we said this earlier, just it's not a diss on Europe. I think like I definitely expressed my preference for traveling in Asia, but that's like totally like a personal thing, and like my personal like prejudices against Europe and like the way that I view things is so different from how other people view them. And I think in general, like through talking with you, and I guess also through talking with you on this podcast, I think we talk a lot about these kinds of like I don't know. I generally don't have these conversations with most people, so like deeply about travel, but it's just like, yeah, like it's a weird thing to be able to travel. I think we've said this before, and it's just us personally, we have some issues with the way that like the mainstream works, at least.
Right.
But it's not trying to like diss the mainstream or say the mainstream's bad or anything. It's just like the mainstream's definitely like not for us.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of like whatever you get value out of is worth it for you. Like, there's no, it's completely up to personal preference. But yeah, I just think in my own life, I don't think that I have the same Asia preference. Like, I think Asia's cool, and I definitely want to travel there more. But I don't like necessarily see it as more desirable generally destination than Europe, or I don't know, anywhere else necessarily. But I do think that we share a lot of the same perspective on, just the way to approach travel generally.
Right.
And kind of what it means to travel and like why it's valuable.
And in that sense, I guess like to close it out, like I don't think we've talked about this, but like what do you, apart from just, being able to talk about these things and like, have some experience just being in like an online sort of presence, I guess what do you hope like doing this podcast does? Because I thought about this like a little bit, because I think ultimately it's just I enjoy just like, I just enjoy talking with you in general, and like it definitely helps us like keep in touch, so like I definitely appreciate that.
Right.
And then I just like making things and putting them somewhere, regardless of if people watch them. I have my own channel as well where I post stuff too.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, but there are sort of like specific like motivations, I think, for like talking about this particular subject as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the baseline things, like it's nice just to talk, and I think that because it goes both ways. We do have pretty similar perspectives, so it's not like we're disagreeing on these things a lot. But I think it's just nice to voice opinions and kind of think things through more, because it kind of forces you to think through your perspective on things.
Yeah.
Whereas, I have a general opinion, but then as you have some, hour-long conversation about something, you're somewhat forced into putting words to the feelings that you've had.
Yeah.
And like even today, I think it's a good example with like the way that certain things stand out in my memory from trips, like interactions or random events or whatever it might be. It's kind of like, of course, I think about those things, but it's not often that I think about why those things are the things that stand out. And kind of, that's just one example for the way that discussing things in this way just really makes you think about like why your experiences have shaped your opinions in the way that they have. Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think it's nice because, like I said, we do both think about things somewhat similarly. So yeah, I don't know. I think not that, again, it's not like we have any better opinion than anyone else. There's no metric for that. But I do think that, maybe not that we have much influence or viewership, but I do think that people could, I think there are like principles to take. I'm sure as we have to learn from other people about the ways to like enjoy our things, I think there are things to take from our perspective that like, we do have some experience in at least for ourselves, forming enjoyable things that we've looked back on as very memorable and like shaping our life experience. And I think that is somewhat of not a skill, but kind of like a unique perspective that you maybe don't come into travel or come into these like settings with. And so maybe hopefully it could be helpful. Like if one day we were popping for people to to hear, or at least interesting. So
yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is just like I guess it's kind of ironic considering we're a podcast on the internet, but it's like it's almost this thing of like just try to like think things through a little more for yourself, like stop relying on whatever to tell you how you should be enjoying yourself or what you should do in a particular place. And like I think like this podcast or this like episode as well as other episodes, like we've talked so much about just like those, especially this episode, just like those spontaneous moments, like today we discovered spontaneity, so we're gonna preach it. It's just like I don't know, it's just I think it'd be cool. I mean, I know people have a lot of different opinions. If like you said, more people started watching or something, we could have like more of like that kind of like dialogue in that way where it's people telling us what they think about our opinions. I mean, I'm sure from many people's perspective we might sound like pretentious and like dumb as hell. Just like it's not that serious or whatever. But I do think like I mean, I at least just hope people just think about these things a little more because I think they're more important than they seem. Where it's like, yeah, but like I just want to go take my trip, my week-long trip, because I don't want, I got my 5 days PTO or whatever, and like I totally understand that, but I do think these things are a little more like warranting of like reflection on yourself and like the world around you, because I mean it's just I think it was a different episode we talked about like just how unfair the world is in a lot of ways, and I think travel is like perfect example of like wow, like we're so privileged here.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you are privileged if you have the privilege of traveling. Then it's like one of the coolest things you can do, and I genuinely think that. And again, it's somewhat attached to that. Like I've been privileged enough or lucky enough that like a lot of the travel I've been able to do is like longer term than just a week or two. Which I think helps in how it's shaped my perspectives. But I genuinely think that the larger trips that I've done have been like very transformative in the way that I like view things in the world. So I think that, like you said, there is so much value to be had, and I think that it's almost like ironic, like you're saying, it warrants more thought. But it's like in some ways, like that more thought is less thought through being spontaneous. You know what I mean? So, right. Like I don't know, it just kind of warrants like deliberation of the way that you want to approach it. And
yeah, that's basically it, bro. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think. But the point being also that it's not like our perspective is necessarily that our perspective is right, but kind of like you were saying that like doing things to maximize your own experience and whatever way that looks like for you is maybe something that does warrant some extra consideration when you're doing something that has the possibility to be very impactful.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think it is that serious. But if you don't think it's that serious, I don't know. Keep listening. I don't know.
Maybe the wrong podcast.
leave a hate
or
comment.
keep listening.
Leave a hate comment.
We'll take any engagement.
Dude, I would be so happy if I got a hate comment.
Genuinely. Make my day.
Or a nice comment. I got a nice comment on one of my. I posted like a 4-minute video on my personal channel, and I got a comment that was like, "Good for you that you're biking. Biking is a great hobby." I was like, "Oh, that's cool."
That's great.
Just from some rando, you know.
Right, but it's honestly, people can. It is significant. Just even that.
Yeah,
Speaking of social interaction, just even that.
That's like funny, bro. That's funny, bro.
All right, that's fire.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next one. Big milestone.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
See you
big
guys.
20. See ya.
Bye.